Hey everyone, it's Matt from Teacup for One. I'm coming at you today from Cineplex Odeon. More specifically, I'm coming at you today from a movie theater at 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning in the middle of the first major blizzard that Southern Ontario has had this entire winter. The roads are not plowed. I'm very cold, but I made the drive out today specifically so that I could see the brand new adaptation of Macbeth starring Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand. Am I cold? Yes. Is there a new regulation in place that means I have to both wear a mask and I am prohibited from eating or drinking during the film? Yes. But this is how badly I want to see this film. Unplowed roads, no refreshments, just me and 2 hours almost of Denzel Washington speaking the great words of William Shakespeare. Welcome to Teacup for One. Okay, well that was bleeping amazing. Let's go talk about it. Whew. Okay guys, we are back where it's warm, which I'm so grateful for. Anyway, I forgot. My name is Matt and I have 2 degrees. I am so excited to talk about this brand new Macbeth film. Seriously, this is why I normally wear a hat. No, seriously, I cannot stress enough that I think this is one of the best films that I've seen in a long time. And I know I might be in a minority here. It's definitely not a film for everybody. It's not a film that everyone is going to love. I mean, if nothing else, the nominations for the SAG Awards and the Golden Globes have shown us that not many people are excited about this movie. But I am. Now, just for a little bit of context, because this is something that you might not know about me, Shakespeare films they're my favorite. I mean, I would almost say they're my favorite genre of filmmaking, but they're not really a genre of filmmaking. We don't get a lot of them. But when we do, I am there. Long before I gave up on my dreams as a creative, I wanted to make Shakespeare films. I am just so fascinated as a film person and as a Shakespeare person at seeing how those two worlds can come together and seeing how that text can be visualized. And like, some directors have done brilliant things. Some directors have done things that I don't think have worked necessarily as well, but when I think about my perfect Shakespeare movie, like the Shakespeare movie that I would aspire to direct one day, this is it. So I think what I want you to take from that is that in some ways when it comes to Shakespeare films, I am incredibly biased, but by that same token, when it comes to Shakespeare films, I am incredibly picky. And I went in not necessarily ready to love this movie, because I don't love the stuff that Joel Coen, or rather that the Coen brothers have put out in the past. I don't dislike their work. I don't know. I don't see in their films what everybody else who's far more insightful and smarter than me, I don't see what they see in their movies. I just watch a Coen brothers movie and just think, that was quirky. That was nice. Partner in the chipper. Although it's worth noting that this movie is only Joel Coen, so maybe I just don't care for Ethan's work. No offense, Ethan, because I'm sure you're watching this video. But, sorry, to get a little bit more on track, there's just so many little things, so many little details and choices that make this movie shine, in my opinion. But I think it ultimately comes down to 2 things that I want to paint in incredibly broad strokes. First broad stroke, the text is served beautifully. You know, that takes care of the Shakespeare angle. Second broad stroke. It might be one of the most visually dynamic films I've seen, if not ever, in a fairly long time. And those are the 2 magic ingredients that, in my mind, are essential to making a Shakespeare film work and to making a Shakespeare film effective. You have to, honor Shakespeare's original text, but then you have to heighten it in a way that is only possible through film. You have to layer in elements that you don't get if you're watching this text performed on a stage. You have the advantage of having subtlety, of having close-ups, of being able to express certain ideas and certain plot points purely through visuals. You have the ability to provide different perspectives on action. This movie does it all. And you know what? If I had taken the life advice from multiple people who said, Matt, don't bother trying to pursue a career as an actor or a director, go to teacher's college, teach drama, teach English. If I had become an English teacher, this is the Macbeth film that I would show exclusively in class. And it is honestly the Macbeth film that I think should be shown exclusively in classes from here on out. When I was in high school, we watched the Roman Polanski Macbeth. Ever since then, I know there are a couple more options out there. There's the Sam Worthington Macbeth. Sam Worthington? Is Sam Worthington the right guy, or am I thinking of the guy from Capricorn 1? Okay, no, I was right. Sam Waterston is the guy from Capricorn 1. Sam Worthington, the guy from the Australian Macbeth. I was right, that's all that matters. And then, of course, there's the Michael Fassbender adaptation. And that's the one that I was comparing this to in my head, probably just because it's the more recent one, but comparative to all past Macbeth films, I feel like this one hits differently. Joel Coen's Macbeth strikes this absolutely beautiful balance of intimacy alongside theatricality. And, I don't know, thinking back to the Fassbender Macbeth, it was good, but I just felt, I don't know, it felt alienating. That's the word I want. So yeah, there was this alienating element to the Fassbender Macbeth. When I think of that movie, I just think of literally Scotland burning, of a lot of smoke, a lot of fire, and this ever-longing sense of dread. And what Joel Coen does is he doesn't shy away from the elements that definitely informed that vibe in the Fassbender film, but he layers in this beautiful sense of vulnerability that made me care about the characters, not just Mr. and Mrs. Macbeth, but all of the characters. It made me care about all of the characters in such a way that the story, at the end of it, hit me. I feel like after seeing this film, I finally understand the text. What? No. Hey, that was not enough to merit the pretentious meter. Okay, well, you know what? They clicked a video review of a Shakespeare film shot in black and white. They knew what they were getting into. Okay, moving on. So, sort of like West Side Story, I have a hard time doing reviews about movies that I love. Because when I do reviews, I like to be constructive. I like to point out the things that I think worked up against the things that I think didn't work, propose how I think the movie could have been more successful. But again, like West Side Story, there's not much. So I don't just want this to be a video of me giving you a laundry list of all the stuff that I love, but that's kind of what we're going to do. The first thing I want to talk about, weirdly enough, is Bruno. And I'm sorry, Disney, but we are going to talk about Bruno. No, yes. And when I say we're going to talk about Bruno, we are talking about Bruno Delbonnel. He was the cinematographer on this project, and he's just looking at his resume and his Wikipedia page. He's a very accomplished cinematographer. I mean, it's no surprises. This movie is absolutely stunning to look at. But for a little bit of context, you might have seen his work. He's the guy who did Amelie. He worked with Joel Coen in the past on Inside Llewyn Davis, and he was also nominated for an Academy Award for Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. And here I am talking about cinematography. I mentioned in my West Side Story video, I'm not a cinematographer. It's not something that I necessarily have an eye for. I don't understand the craft, but I can tell when something looks good and when the visuals, in addition to being stunning, like visually, are serving the story. And that's what this film is doing. I'm always going to be a fan of black and white cinematography when it's done properly. And here it is done properly. Now, I remember reading that they were taking some inspiration from Bergman. I can't remember if it was Ingrid or Ingmar. It's the Bergman who directed Seventh Seal, not the one who was the love interest in Casablanca. Let me look it up. Yeah, okay. Ingrid is Casablanca. Ingmar is the director. Are they related? Okay, you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They took inspiration from Ingmar Bergman's films, and you definitely see the payoff there. But another connection that I made, and maybe this is just me, but I felt like there was a visual connection between this film and the work of Aubrey Beardsley. Aubrey Beardsley was, I believe, a Victorian illustrator. He did a lot of stuff Okay, I don't know what medium he worked in. I'm assuming it was ink, because when you look at his images and when you look at the stuff that he created, he did all this beautiful work that was just like, it was line work. He worked with minimalism, but he also worked with extreme detail. And when you look at anything by Aubrey Beardsley, there's a very distinct style that I think was mirrored in this film. Just in terms of the interplay between black and white, between like negative space, minimalism, it was a treat for the eyes, let me tell you that. And aside from just how beautiful everything looked, the camera blocking was mind-blowing. One of the most exciting things that I think filmmakers can do is just choreograph a shot so that the visual dynamic and like the visual composition is entirely informed by physical movement, either by the camera or by the actors within the frame. There are a lot of examples of this in this movie, but the first one that comes to mind is how they introduce Lady Macbeth. It's one of my favorite shots in the film. It's so simple, but it's so good. So it starts as a wide shot on a hallway, essentially, and then you have this beautiful silhouette of the doorway, and then Lady Macbeth comes into the doorway, and then she's framed by the door. Then she just walks down the hall. That's all she's doing. But the way that this shot is set up is so brilliant, because as she's walking through the corridor, she's passing in and out of light coming in through the windows. So then all of a sudden, you have this figure coming in to this beautiful frame within a frame, closing in the distance, getting closer and closer to the lens. And as she gets closer, she's coming in and out of shadow, coming in and out of being a silhouette, until finally she ends pretty well framing herself in a close-up. It is so good. And all of that is happening while she's reading Macbeth's letter that's telling her about the initial prophecy made by the witches. So it's not just that it's a cool looking shot, it's that it's complementing the narrative action so beautifully. This is probably the best moment for me to transition into talking about Joel Coen's direction, which is really the heart and soul of why I think this is a superior Macbeth film to the ones that have come before it. And superior is probably the wrong word, but just in my view, I think this movie is, I guess, a stronger adaptation than what we've seen before, which is just a more polite way to say superior. So you know what? I made a choice. I'm committing to it. I think this is a superior Macbeth film, because when I think of past adaptations, they're very visceral, they're raw, they're gritty, they're violent, and that absolutely is what the text is. But aside from the violence, Macbeth is kind of a psychological thriller. It's constantly playing with this balance between reality and fantasy. It's Macbeth questioning what is real versus what isn't. And what Joel Coen did was he leaned into that element of the story and gave us a surrealist retelling of Macbeth. A retelling of Macbeth that's more in control and more balletic. And I love surrealism. And it works with this text brilliantly, because it is constantly putting us into that mindset of our title character, with him questioning what is actually happening around him. And by all means, feel free to correct me if I am totally misinterpreting what surrealism is. But when I think of surrealism, I think of this constant push and pull between reality and fantasy, or not even fantasy, but this dreamlike state, and then having a blurred line between the two. And that is exactly what Macbeth is. It's about our title character questioning what's real around him, and then kind of allowing that blurred perception between his reality and his fantasy to influence his actions. And I think there's no better example of this than the dagger scene. This is the first time I have been captivated by the dagger speech in any production of Macbeth, be it film or on stage. On stage, no matter how good the actor is, I'm always taken out of it a little bit, because it's just a guy who's like, is there a dagger I see before me? Let me clutch thee. And that moment never works for me. You know what I'm talking about. If you've ever been in an acting class where you've had to watch somebody try to perform the dagger speech, there's always that moment where he just says, come, let me clutch thee. It's always this. And I think the filmic equivalent of that is when you have a pseudo-invisible dagger just leading Mackers towards Duncan. This is the first time that visually the dagger scene has worked for me. We were seeing just something glistening at the end of the corridor, something vaguely dagger-shaped. And seeing this visual was, I don't know, putting me in the same headspace as Macbeth. I was thinking, well, is that a dagger? it looks like it could be a door handle, but it could also be a dagger. And I don't know, just sharing that visual perspective with us, it made the text make sense. I understood the dagger speech and I liked it for the first time. And the absolute genius move of it is that it wasn't a dagger, it was a door handle. The dagger was all in his mind. It was a dagger of the mind. And just such a brilliant little detail is that when we came back to that same hallway, to that same door later on in the film, it was a structurally different door handle from what we saw in the dagger speech. In the dagger speech, it was shaped kind of like a dagger, like pointy at the top, handle at the bottom. But then when we saw the door later, it was just a straight door handle, like a straight piece of metal. At least I'm pretty sure that's what it was. I've only seen the film once. But you know what? Even the fact that I am questioning my memory and my perception of reality, it means that the movie did a bleeping brilliant job with that scene. And that's just one example, but the entire film is driven by this brilliant visualization, and that's why I think it works so well. I have this whole philosophy that a Shakespeare film should almost be approached the same way that you would approach a silent film. Yes, you do have the text to guide you and to inform you of the characters, and like the beauty of Shakespeare is within the verse and the prose and the words. But if you're making a movie, it has to work as a movie. You have to get past the hurdle of the fact that this language is dense. And so the story should be able to operate visually. Almost like, I don't know, almost like being able to watch a foreign film without subtitles and still getting the emotional impact, purely through the performances and purely through the visuals. That's what this movie is. Even if you don't understand what the characters are saying, the relationships, the story, everything is so purposefully and so brilliantly communicated. Which I guess is kind of a good transition now to talk about the performances. Some of the people that I obviously have to address. Denzel. It's Denzel Washington doing Shakespeare. I mean, that's like Gordon Ramsay cooking you a meal. Is that the best example? That's like Picasso painting you a painting. That's like Lin-Manuel Miranda teaching you American history. Denzel Washington. Like, we all know he's going to be amazing in this movie, and he is amazing in this movie. Do you want to hear my reasons why I think he's amazing? Okay, well, if you insist. What I loved is that just by the nature of what kind of movie this was, it allowed him to open up to be a little bit more theatrical. But that's not to say that it felt like I was watching a recorded stage performance. Yes, he had this wonderful theatrical energy, but he balanced it so well with these quieter, more intimate moments. It was this beautiful dance of being big and being small. It was Shakespeare perfectly performed for film. In terms of what he specifically brought to the character, there were all the things that we've seen before, obviously, all the traits that Macbeth needs to have, so being a fierce warrior, being somebody driven by ambition, eventually questioning his sanity, that was all there. But just by merit of how smart I think Denzel is as an actor, alongside with Joel Coen's choice to cast Macbeth and Lady Macbeth as older characters, it layered in all these beautiful new nuances and dynamic qualities. Like Denzel's Macbeth is a man who comes off as being tired, sad, vulnerable, and seeing those qualities feed into the ambition, I think elevates that journey so well. And of course, I could say all the same things for Frances McDormand. Like, she's one of the greatest actors that we have right now, and her Lady Macbeth is everything you expect her Lady Macbeth to be. And I think the key is the two of them together. They have beautiful chemistry. And the selling point with this adaptation is really showing us the Macbeths as an older couple. And that's not to say that we're watching like the senior citizen version of Macbeth. These two still have the same level of passion, the same level of drive and ambition and like potential for violence that we have seen with the Macbeths as like a younger couple or even a middle-aged couple. But the difference here is that they're more in control of themselves. They're playing these characters as people who have lived lives. In some ways, they're more in control of their emotions. They're more in control of their actions because they have that lived life experience, and it informs their drive in such a different way. Because on the one hand, it almost has this feeling of, well, we're probably going to die within the next 10 to 15 years or so anyway, so what do we have to lose? But then on the flip side of that, I don't know, there's this really beautiful shot of Denzel at the very end when Macduff is coming in to battle him, and he's just sitting on the throne alone, and you just see this sad old man who's lost everything while having gained everything. And it comes back to that question of, what was the point? What was it all for? And that's a narrative element that is so pertinent in Macbeth, that question of what was the point? Why did I do it? Like, is this the legacy that I want? Was it worth it? When you have an older person going through those motions, it just makes the story hit differently. Ugh. If you take anything away from all of that rambling, just let it be this. Denzel and Francis together, chef's kiss. But now that I've spoken about them, I want to take a moment to acknowledge Katrhyn Hunter as not one, not two, but all three witches. And it's important to me that I at least acknowledge her, because it doesn't look like any of the organizations that give out the acting awards are doing anything to acknowledge her. And just let me ask you this. What is the point of having acting awards if you're not going to acknowledge a performance like Katrhyn Hunter's with at the very least a nomination? Yes, I think Ariana DeBose 100% deserves to win like anything people want to give her for Best Supporting Actress for West Side Story, but in my mind, the only valid competition from what I've seen from last year's films is Katrhyn Hunter in Macbeth. What is the point of having acting awards if you're not going to acknowledge people who put in performances on film that could not be done by any other person? The stuff that Katrhyn Hunter does as the three witches in this film, that is a once-in-a-lifetime performance. That is a once-in-a-lifetime performance that reinvents characters that have been around for 400 years. She is playing the three witches in a way that I don't think we've ever seen before, in terms of what she does with her voice, in terms of what she does with her body. I was watching it, I didn't know what the bleep was going on. It just struck and triggered this primal fear and discomfort in me, while at the same time, I was fascinated to hear her speak more. Not to mention the fact that she also does double duty and plays an old man who may or may not be the witches in disguise. Her performance, I don't have the words. I don't have the words for how incredible, unique, and good it was. And maybe this is just my outlook on things, but I think that's what you acknowledge with acting awards, especially acting awards for film. The beauty of film is that you're able to capture a moment. You're able to capture something that one specific person is able to do that maybe can't be replicated by anybody else, as opposed to theater where you have multiple actors cycling through the same roles. This film captured a once-in-a-lifetime performance of these characters that nobody else could give. Nobody. And just nominate the witch. That's all I'm asking. Okay, anyway, I'm gonna get off my soapbox and say, this here, friends, concludes yet another episode of Teacup 4-1. My thoughts were kind of all over the place. Just let it be known that I think everybody needs to see Joel Coen's Macbeth. By the time this video comes out, it's probably going to be on Apple TV, and if it's not, it'll be on Apple TV very quickly. It wouldn't have the same impact on a small screen as it has seeing it in a big movie theater, but no matter how you watch the movie, just watch the movie. If you like Shakespeare, if you like films, if you like Shakespeare films, you will love this film. Or maybe you'll hate it, in which case, by all means, come back and let me know why in the comment section down below. Let's get this conversation going. Let's open up the dialogue. Let me know why you think Katrhyn Hunter is not being bleeping nominated for Best Supporting Actress. Anyway, like I said, this concludes yet another episode of Teacup 4-1. So please, let me know in the comment section down below. Have you seen Macbeth? And what did you think? And if you want to be the first to know when I release more videos on film reviews, Disney, Shakespeare, sometimes Funko Pops, sometimes cats. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed already. If you haven't subscribed already, it is super easy. All you have to do is click on my face. Thanks for joining me again today, everyone. My name is Matt, and I have 2 degrees, and that's the tea cup for one. Nominate Katrhyn Hunter.